really fun, thankless job. Just kidding. It's totally not a thankless job. We should all be grateful for the toddlers that we have at home right now. I'm not live or anything.
Oh, you're not live on Instagram?
Smiling and
I'm smiling at the camera for no reason.
posing.
All right, let me just open up LinkedIn so I can see.
Would any of you who are watching LinkedIn be willing to share our stream? That would be so great. And then other people can see us too. Because we're really trying to, we know it's Friday night, but y'all are at home. So hopefully you don't mind and you could share this with your connections so they can find us too.
There we go. Hello, hello.
We're watching LinkedIn. Oh.
Yes, we are live. Hello, hello. Give me 1 second.
If I speak in Russian to you.
So I'm adding us to the stream and I will remove this banner from
Mine's
here.
ready. I'm ready.
Yours is ready to go? You're much faster than I am.
I know, I'm very impatient.
There we go. Hello, everyone. Okay, now I got to remove the starting soon. And I will just put Blake and Jacob Morgan on there. And let's make that smaller for all of us so it's not so much in the way. There we go. Okay, so now we are officially live. So Blake, would you like to kick us off and introduce us as if we were doing the audio version of the podcast?
Yes. I'm waiting for us to be on my LinkedIn. We can't see us.
Oh, you can start. There's a couple second delay.
Yeah. Well, welcome everyone, no matter where you are listening. We're all at home together. Isn't it cozy to be at home for a month? This is our
sort of
12th or 13th episode.
It's episode number 12.
It's episode 12. And today, Jacob and I are talking about something that actually a chief data officer asked me this last week. And that's a great way we get ideas for podcasts is just from our community, from all of you telling us, well, how do I do this? And so the question was, well, how do I get a book deal?
We actually get asked this a lot by senior level leaders, you name it. Everybody wants to get a book deal. So this is a very common question.
I think wants
everybody out there wants to get a book deal. So it's understandable.
Or make money off a book.
Exactly.
Or use a book as a tool to make you more money.
Yes. So today we are going to share how to get a book deal. This will probably be a multi-part episode. We're not going to talk about the actual process of writing the book today or selling the book today. Today, we're just going to talk about the specific aspects of getting a book deal because that is usually the most challenging part for a lot of people. And between the two of us, we've written 6 books together. I have written 4 and Blake has written 2. And my books have been with McGraw Hill and with Wiley. And Blake has written 2 books with Taylor and Francis and with Harper Collins. So all really, really big, top tier, major business publishers, some of the biggest business publishers in the world. So I'd like to think that we have some insight into how to get a book deal. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Blake, do you want to say anything about our books, or should we just jump right into the topics?
I mean, what's to say about our book? So Jacob and I, my topic is customer experience. I've been focusing on that for 12 years. And Jacob has pivoted. He's jumped around a little more than me, or evolved. And I've pretty much stayed in my lane.
Mine are on like future of work, leadership, employee experience. Some more on what happens inside of companies, and Blake is more on what happens outside of companies. But again, as I mentioned, collectively, we've written 6 books. They've been translated into many languages. They've all become bestsellers on Amazon. So the books have done well. And we've learned a lot during the book writing and selling process. And I guess we'll jump right into some of the topics that we have here. The very first thing that people always want to know is if they should self-publish a book or if they should go with a traditional publisher. I have tons that I could say on this, but Blake, why don't you start off with your thoughts on self-publishing or going with a traditional publisher? Why didn't you self-publish?
I think it depends on who you are and what you're trying to do. There are people with huge social media followings, huge newsletters, people like Mel Robbins. I guess I talk about her in every.
You talk about it a lot. Yeah, you need some new examples.
But I just love her so much, Mel. I just feel like you're such a great person. Okay. So these people have such big networks. They don't need the validity of a publisher. But then, I mean, you look at like Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, which is probably one of the most sold memoirs of all time. And even she went with a publisher. So it depends on what you're trying to do. If people follow you like crazy and you have ownership over a niche and you just want to make a lot of money off a self-published book where there's no middleman taking a cut, self-publishing can be a really lucrative option. For Jacob and myself, we need to build trust and credibility. We need people to say, oh, you wrote this book with Harper Collins, and that's a publisher I know. So this must be a good book, or she must be someone who knows what she's talking about. So it's all kind of adding to your credibility. And the book, we didn't write books to make money. We wrote books to get speaking gigs, which pay really well, and other content projects. So I think that's a big misunderstanding, is like, you must be making lots of money on royalties. But the truth is, when you go with the publisher, which Jacob and I only have done that, you don't make, I just got lost in my husband's eyes for a minute. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out where you're going with this too.
No, you don't make a lot of money off of a book, but I mean, you can, but it's more the access you get, the speaking invitations, the credibility. And so that's what I'll say.
I agree. I think, so.
Oh, this isn't working.
To be very clear for a lot of people, you will not make a lot of money from the book itself. I mean, of course, there are some cases where you will make a lot of money from the book. Somebody like a J.K. Rowling, if your book becomes, millions of copies sold, you do make a ton of money from that. But most people who write a book, you are not going to make money from the book itself. You probably will get around $1 to $2 per copy that sells. So you can imagine, if you're making around $1 to $2 per copy, how many thousands of copies of your book do you need to sell before you can actually make a lot of money from it? You need to sell a lot. So you don't actually make money from the book itself. It's kind of what the book allows you to do. The book is sort of like your business card or your calling card. It's what allows you to get speaking gigs in our case. It's what allows you to have that legitimacy, that credibility. So from that perspective, that's ultimately why most people will write a book. As far as the self-publish versus traditional publisher, it does depend on what your goals are. If your goal is simply to just write a book, anybody can write a book. You can just start typing away right now, put together 50 to 70, 80,000 words, go on to something like Amazon, which has their own self-publishing platform, and self-publish the book yourself.
Self-publish the book yourself.
Self-publish the book, yeah.
It's a lot of work, even to say it.
It is. It's a lot of work even to say it. But anybody can publish a book themselves. For what Blake and I do, my thought process was that if I want to have credibility, then I need to go work with a reputable publisher, because I'm interviewing CEOs. I'm trying to get endorsements from top tier CEOs. And so for me, having, at least for my first few books, a reputable, solid business publisher there is important. And there's also a lot of stuff that goes into self-publishing a book. You have to find your own copy editor. You got to, do your own printing. You got to do your own shipping. You got to do a lot of stuff that people don't realize that you need to do. The benefit is you get to have much more control. So you do make far more money from the book because you keep the majority of the profits. You can discount the book if you want. You can make the book available for free if you want. You have your own say on the book cover, on the design, on everything. It's your book. You control, 99.999% of all the aspects of it. When you work with a traditional publisher, that's not the case. You don't always get a final say in the design or on the book cover or on what everything looks like. If you have a good reputation, a good relationship with the publisher, you can probably get a lot of the things that you want. But by and large, you need to remember that you have a partner in this, and your partner has as much say for the book as you do. That's something that a lot of people forget. But if you want that credibility, if you want that legitimacy, if you want to have that reputation, if you want to be seen as, I think, more of a trusted authority and a leader in a space, I think going with a publisher, at least for your first few books, is the right choice. And especially if you're not already famous. As Blake mentioned, if you have a following, hundreds of thousands of people out there, everyone's following what you do, and you already speak at a ton of conferences, you could probably get away with almost anything. But for most people on planet Earth, that's not the case. And so if you can go with a publisher, it's maybe just a little bit easier for the first few books, first book for sure.
And can I say that people think it's really hard to get a publishing deal?
It's
really not.
Oh, yes, it is.
It's not if you're consistent and hardworking and you don't mind rejection. But if you keep going, you will get one eventually. It just might take longer than you thought. But I think it's interesting just
I disagree with that. I think it's super hard.
Well, I mean, if you have been doing content for a while, someone will publish you, and you're a good writer and you keep trying. I mean, that's my experience. It was hard, but like most things in life are hard. It's just how many times are you willing to get the door closed in your face and hear no and keep going? But I didn't find it to be that hard, other than hearing no all the time, which I'm used to anyway, and I don't really mind. Tell me no, and I'll just come right back and ask again.
Fair enough. So those are our thoughts on self-publishing versus traditional publishing. Blake and I have both, for all of our books, have gone with a major publisher. But if anybody has any questions about that, we can kind of get into more detail on it. Next question we get asked a lot is, do you need a literary agent, or should you just kind of go off on your own? Again, Blake and I have never worked with a literary agent. I know plenty of people who have. Basically, a literary agent is somebody who you partner with, and they try to get a book deal for you. They try to sell your book to a publisher, and then they take a cut. I think it's usually around 20%, 15%, thereabouts, of every book sale that you get. So now, instead of making $1 or $2 per book, you might be making, 80 cents per book. And even if you do get a literary agent, it's still not even a guarantee that you're going to get published. But if you want to go down that road, you can. Like I said, I know people who've gone down that road. Blake and I have never done that. But if you're new to the game, hey, why not? You can find a list of literary agents. You can go into something like Upwork and find literary agents. If you look at a lot of authors whose books you really like, if you go to the acknowledgements section, you can usually find the literary agents that they've worked with, if any. And you can reach out to these people. You can usually find their contact info online. You can Google them, reach out to them, and kind of see how it goes. And again, no harm in trying, but it's just not something that Blake and I have ever done.
Someone has a question already.
Yeah. Well, why don't we do questions at the end? The next part of this that we want to talk about is a book proposal. So a lot of people don't realize this, but you can pretty much go to a lot of major publishers' websites, whether it's Wiley or Taylor and Francis, and there's usually sections on these websites where you can submit a proposal or download a proposal template. I know at least Wiley had that. I know several other publishers have that. So find a list of major publishers, go onto their website, and see if there is a proposal template that you can download, and you can start to fill that out. If there isn't a proposal template, there's usually a section there that says like for authors, and they tell you what is required to be able to reach out to them or to submit a proposal. So that's something that a lot of people forget. I think what we want to do a little bit now is look at the actual aspects of a book proposal. So Blake actually put her book proposal template into a Google Doc here that we're looking at. And do you want to read through some of the, just kind of the headers?
Yeah. I think a book proposal or pitch also weeds out the people that are like, nah, that would be fun to write a book, to the people that are like, oh, I am serious as hell about this book.
It's a lot of work.
I've thought about it, and it kind of weeds out. Can we say the wheat from the chaff? Is that like a biblical phrase? I don't think I've ever used that phrase.
You can say whatever you want.
But anyway, it's a book pitch is not for the faint of heart. Just to be extremely Shakespearean with all of you, with my.
And actually, we just got a comment on here from Bridget. She said, "Do you have to have an agent before approaching a publisher, or can you approach them directly without an agent?" So I think we touched on that. You can approach them.
We haven't talked about that yet, because I haven't told my LinkedIn publisher story of how I got my publisher.
All right, Bridget, we're gonna get to that in more detail in a minute.
So my book pitch was probably like 22 pages. It was some like images and like lists and things, which we'll get into, but it's long. I mean, it's a lot of work. First, they're going to ask you for book titles. Normally, I think the book title that you use is not even on this list. I was looking at old ones that I had. I remember my book ended up being The Customer of the Future, but one of the titles that was fun was Tomorrowland. It's like, that's such a great idea. In publishing an editorial, you have to be willing to kill your darling. So in retrospect, like Tomorrowland is a terrible name for a book about customer experience and technology, because no one knows that it's about customer experience. So the role of the publisher is also to like talk you down off the ledge when you're going to do something that's kind of going to hurt yourself.
Talk some sense into you.
You can have fun with this, because it's likely that the book title that you have in your book pitch is not going to be the actual name of the book.
Yes. Hey, speaking of which, Peter Knox is one of the people who liked this chat, and
sorry, Peter.
I know he's no longer at Wiley anymore, but Peter is the person that I worked with.
I met Peter.
Yeah, so Peter's the person who I worked with, who helped me with a lot of the book marketing at Wiley. So hi, Peter.
Hi, Peter. And you know, speaking of book title, like that was part of the value of me for working with Harper Collins, is like the editor I worked with, new title, totally new way to package the content in the book. Dog just walked off, so she might end up peeing on the carpet. The expertise you get from a publisher is like, hey, this person I'm working with has been in the industry for 30 years. And he knows what sells. And the book title we came up with, my book ended up being my new book best-selling in 2 places. And my first book did not sell very well. So it's the difference between working with someone who cares and who's going to challenge you and tell you what works and what doesn't work there's a variety of publishers. Some try harder than others. But anyway, back to the book pitch.
Yeah, just go over some of the
titles.
Headings, yeah.
Project overview. What's the premise of the book? Why is it timely? What sets it apart from other ideas and themes? Why should anybody care? What makes it relevant today? All of you can start writing books about the COVID pandemic, because by next year, everyone will love to read that. Who's your audience? I mean, in any pitch, this is like, who's going to buy it? Who's going to read it? And I think it's good for you to really do some digging on your industry, because this really will matter. Although most of us say it's for everyone. That's actually not a great answer. You don't want your product to be for everyone. They asked if the book was an international perspective. They wanted list of competition, so comparable books in the subject area, and how my book would complement or differ from them. And they said, be realistic. Don't just like list big bestsellers, but really do your homework. And then authorship. So a brief bio about who you are, why you're special. This is a chance where you've got to toot your own horn, puff your feathers up. You've got to get the publisher to believe in you, that you are somebody who gets things done, and make them want to invest their time and money with you. I know people struggle with this. If you have to, talk to other people and have them reflect back, well, like, what is my brand and what makes me special? Or even have a friend help you list your accomplishments if you're not comfortable doing it on your own. They want to know speaking schedule. So if you have any events scheduled. When I wrote my first book, my career was a lot quieter than it has been in the last 2 years. You don't have to be a superhero to get a book deal. So even if you have humble beginnings, like, that's fine. You have to start somewhere. And then table of contents they want. So again, this might all change, which mine did with my book, but they need some type of organization. So really take the time to sit and think, well, how can I package this information in a way that makes sense and is digestible for people? And don't just rush through this piece, because you really you're creating a product. So when you think about this information product, how are you going to make it appealing for people? They also want writing samples. So if you've been published, that's great. If you haven't, that's okay too, but it might take you a little longer to get a book deal. A great first step is to start writing for major magazines or blogs. They want length and timetable. So how long is the book? How long is it going to take you to write it? The biggest piece is marketing opportunities, which Jacob can talk more about. For my first book, Jacob actually spent money putting my book in airports, bookstores, which was cool, but did it sell books? It really didn't. And it cost us a fortune. So the publisher might expect you to put some money down. Books that are best-selling, often, like, it's executives in business at big companies where they'll actually have their own employees buy the book. So it becomes a bestseller and then, like, reimburse them, which is a little shady, but you see how competitive it is, that even these famous senior executives or CEOs need to depend on their own businesses to buy the book so it hits these bestseller lists. And then lastly, endorsements from your last book or other places that says, like, hey, this is somebody who's trustworthy, who's a good, smart business person that we should work with.
And depending on the proposal template that you download, it might be slightly different. So for Blake, let me just quickly recap. Title of the book, overview of the project, the audience, is it international? Who's your competition? Brief bio about yourself, speaking schedule if you have one, contents, table of contents, writing samples, length and timetable, marketing opportunities, and endorsements if you have them. So when submitting a book proposal, I'm going to put a little more emphasis on this. I'm going to go with like 70% of what the publisher cares about is your ability to sell the book. You can literally pitch an idea to a publisher about anything: underwater basket weaving, how to play chess, how to become an amazing racquetball player, whatever it is.
No, don't write that book.
And I wouldn't write that book, but you can pitch any book that you want to a publisher. And if they see, for example, hey, you're speaking at 70 events every year, you have 500,000 people subscribed to your newsletter, you got endorsements from all these.
No one has that.
You have endorsements from all these CEOs of companies around the world. They will publish your book, even though it's a completely ridiculous idea and a title, because they know that it's going to sell.
You know what? They might not, though.
No, they will. For publishers' number one priority is to make money.
But we both heard that even people with 100,000 Twitter followers,
well, Twitter is useless as a marketing tool. So wouldn't.
It's not just about your social media following.
No, not social media. Social media, as my publisher told me, social media is not going to be what sells you books. You might sell some books on social media, but your publisher really wants to know that you have an audience. You're out there, you're speaking at events, you have people subscribe to your newsletter, people are engaging with you, you have a really big personal brand and a presence.
Can I just let me interrupt you. One piece of advice: I went and had coffee in Harper Collins offices in December, which is like the most beautiful offices. It's in a very old building in downtown New York. And he told me, you know what, Blake? He's like, we even have publishers that go on TV, and after a TV appearance, they don't sell books. But what does sell books actually are like niche podcasts. So go on as many niche podcast radio shows as you can.
Yeah.
I thought that was really good advice.
Yeah. I mean, people aren't going to
podcasts.
Yeah. People are not going to buy A lot of people think, and it used to be thought, that if you have a big social media presence that you can sell a lot of stuff, and that's not the case. So if you want to get a book deal, the number one thing that your publisher is going to look for is that you can sell the book. So 70% of your book proposal is going to be you convincing your potential publisher that you have what it takes to sell the book. Now, how many books are we talking about? On average, in the first year, a publisher wants to know that you can sell, let's say, around 10,000 copies of the book. That's considered good. Most books, and I don't remember what the exact number is, I think it was over 90% of all books never sell more than 1,000 copies. The vast majority of books that get published out there are failures. So keep that in mind. That when
my first book kind of failed, to be honest.
Yes.
It really didn't sell.
So keep that in mind that
didn't
when a publisher is looking to make, they're kind of like VCs if you think about it. They're making a bunch of bets, and they want to make sure that their bets pay off. And so if they publish, 1,000 books, the vast majority of them are going to fail. But the 10% of them that do well usually do really well. So keep that in mind when you are putting together a book proposal, that ultimately you are convincing your publisher that you can sell the book. You are selling. You really, really need to put as much emphasis on that portion as you can. Because I'll tell you that if you have a wonderful idea and you're a really nice guy or a wonderful lady, and you're an excellent writer, but you don't speak at any conferences, you don't have a following, you don't have any of that stuff, then guess what? Nobody's going to publish a book for you. And I get it. I mean, it's a really, really rough and tough business. And I like Peter in the LinkedIn chat says publisher equals a VC for sure. So I'm glad Peter validates my statement.
Where's he now?
He's at another company now. He's head of marketing at a company called Book Highlight. Yes. So he's been at Wiley for many, many years.
I think the book industry, I just don't feel like it's dying. I just feel like you're not going to bite your nails on this webinar.
It's not
people
a webinar.
Are still buying books. People care about books. Businesses, marketers care about books. I think that a lot of people have the attitude that the book industry is dead, and I just don't see it. I mean, all I see is excitement and opportunity. Well, maybe it looks a little
digital
different
versus
than it used
physical.
To.
Yeah, I mean, my publisher
Audiobooks.
told me that physical copies sell more than digital ones. So I'm assuming that's still true. But anyway,
and
so
people
that's
are buying audiobooks more than ebooks, actually, because they listen to it on their commute to work. Do you guys remember commuting? Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Feels like so long ago.
So that's what a typical book proposal would look like. That's what you can expect to fill out. And again, Blake said hers was around 20, 30 pages. Mine, I think, was between 20 to 40 pages. And you really got to spend time on this. Give yourself a couple of weeks to really think through this and flesh out the idea. Because you might submit this to a publisher and a publisher will say, hey, thanks, we read it. It was wonderful, but unfortunately, it's not a good fit for us. And as Blake mentioned, you need to be prepared to get told no several times. So you're going to be submitting lots of different proposals to lots of different publishers. And so be prepared for that this is not an easy process. This is definitely going to take you a lot of time. Okay, so that takes care of the book proposal aspect. What else should we talk about as far as getting a book deal? One of the other things is this was one of the other ideas we came up with, is how you might be able to get a book deal. You can also.
I have to talk about how I want to tell a story of how I got my book deal.
Okay, share your story, how you got the book deal.
No, finish.
No, go ahead.
And then I'll interrupt you.
Well, I was going to say that one of the things that you can try to do is to find a co-author. So if you don't have much of a presence at all and much of a following, one of the things that you can try to do is to pair up with a co-author, somebody who would be open to writing a book with you, who has a little bit more cachet, a little bit more of a brand, a little bit more visibility, somebody who can add a little bit more credibility and legitimacy to your book proposal.
Or if you're famous, then you just have someone interview you and write the book for you.
Yeah, there are services that do that, by the way.
And what about forewords? Because we haven't talked about foreword.
Well, that's not even. Once you get the book deal, who cares about the foreword? That's the easy part.
The foreword does matter. Like I noticed, and endorsements. We haven't talked about that either. Let me tell them about how I got my book deal. The first book deal I got, it was a tiny publisher. They ended up, I think I connected with her through cold email. They ended up being acquired by a huge company. It ended up being a disaster, to be frank. Second book, I remembered someone from Harper Collins had emailed me to check out a blog he had written about customer service. I remembered that from so long ago and asked him, would he be willing to float my book pitch to somebody at Harper Collins? And to my shock, he said yes. And they were starting this new, they're going to get all these pitches now, but this new imprint, which was more about leadership and business. And coincidentally, they also published Rachel Hollis's book. They probably like her a little more than they like me. But anyway, the point is, I basically got a book deal through a cold message on LinkedIn, which many of you are watching right now. And I just think you have to try every avenue because you just never know. And if you put effort into how you communicate to people online, like you might just get what you ask for, and I did, which was really exciting. And Harper Collins is, for me, they're such good business partners. And they have a lot of integrity, and it's just been a world of difference working with them.
Yeah. And by the way, so let's be clear what a publisher does. So a lot of people think that a publisher is going to help you sell the book. And this is the mistake that I made when I wrote my first book with McGraw Hill. A publisher is not going to help you sell copies of your book. You have to sell copies of your own book. A publisher's job is to help edit your book, to print your book. They're going to support you, and they will certainly reach out to various media outlets, and they'll do their own kind of PR thing to help you. But ultimately, if you think that a publisher is going to be the entity that sells your book or makes your book successful, you are so wrong. So that's a really important thing that people need to remember. A publisher is not there to sell your book. A publisher is there to help make your book into a book. And ultimately, it's up to you to sell it. And they are like your support. They are like your executive assistant, if you will. If you need books sent to a certain location, they'll send them there. If you need free copies of a book sent to media, they'll send them there. They are there to support you. But the success of a book is ultimately going to fall on your shoulders. And that is something that a lot of people do not realize when they work with a publisher. They get really excited that they got a book deal and they think, oh my God, this is it. I made it. And then they find out that they, sell 100 copies total within like 3 years. So keep that in mind, that it's a ton of work for how to actually go about selling the book.
But just because you fail at one book doesn't mean you won't get a book deal. Like I was just honest with the new publisher when they asked me like, hey, we noticed your book didn't sell that well, basically. And that's a very uncomfortable position. But I think if you're just honest, and the publisher, it wasn't totally their fault. It was a mix, but honesty is always good. Everybody can smell when you try and puff up your feathers and make yourself sound better than you actually are. I think being humble and honest is always a good approach with a new business partner rather than lying, because everybody can smell that fakeness.
Yeah.
Another thing I did when I wrote my second book was I looked at people in my space who published books, and I looked at who published them, and then I targeted their publishers. So, we had other ideas like that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at our annoying little Yorkie dog over there who's so cute, squealing and making noise. Dinner. There's a lot of other stuff that we can say about this, as far as how to sell a book and how to write the book. But I think for now, we covered a lot of the important things as far as how to get the book deal. So let me just kind of recap some things and see if we forgot anything. We talked about self-publishing versus a traditional publisher. The literary agent question, this is the one that came up, and I'll put up Bridget's comment again here on my live stream, which she says, do you need an agent before approaching a publisher, or can you approach them directly without an agent? It depends on the publisher. There are a lot of publishers out there who will allow you to just approach them directly. And there are some publishers who say you have to have a literary agent. There's also different types of publishers. Something a lot of people also don't realize is there are a lot of publishers out there. There are a couple big ones that people are familiar with, like a Wiley, like a McGraw Hill, like Hatchet or Harper Collins, but there are also a lot of smaller publishers out there who you can work with and maybe even get a better chance of getting your book published. So in this case, Google is your friend. Google like top leadership publishing houses, small leadership or small publishing houses, whatever your niche is, whatever your topic is, you can find a lot of different publishing options. You don't have to get published with your first book with a tier 1 publisher. You just don't. You can get your first book published with a smaller publishing house and then get a larger one later. Or you can self-publish your book, and then a publishing house, if your book does well, might tell the dog to be quiet. She's interrupting my train of thought. So you can self-publish, and then later on down the road, if your book does well, maybe a publishing house will come along and they will want to buy the rights to your book. So there are a lot of different avenues and pathways that you can take to get a book deal. The other thing that we talked about is book proposals. So we gave you a rundown of what a typical book proposal looks like. Again, the recommendation there is go to a website. You're really going to open that bag of dog treats while I'm talking?
I'm doing it. This is real life, you guys. Take one.
So I don't even know what I was going to say. No, it just smells like peanut butter dog treats. Good God. Yeah, so we went through a typical book proposal.
Are we finished? Because we missed some things.
What did we miss? Well, let me give a quick.
Should you get someone to write your book forward?
Well, that's not about how to get a book deal. First, you got to get
the book deal.
That's once you get the book deal.
We're gonna do another podcast.
Yeah, we'll do another episode about this. Okay, so we gave the rundown of a typical book proposal. Again, best way to get a book proposal. You can even Google book proposal template, and you'll find them. Go to any publishing house's website. You can find book proposal templates there, and really, really spend the majority of your time on the marketing section. They want to know that you're going to sell this freaking book. Again, that's the number one thing that they care about. Let's see.
Can we answer questions now?
Yeah, I mean, I answered the one question that I had. Somebody else asked, where can we find your articles? I'm not sure if you're talking about me or Blake.
Your articles?
Yeah, I don't know who.
Jacob Morgan.
So you can Google either Jacob Morgan, or if you want Blake's articles, you can Google Blake Morgan Forbes or just Blake Morgan, and you'll find tons of stuff about her as well.
I have some questions.
Yeah, let's get to your questions.
He says, somebody says, does it make sense to write a book just for publicity on a topic that you are an expert about?
Well,
just for publicity.
Well, do you want to jump in first?
I mean, publicity, it has to make sense for you. Like, are you selling something? Jacob and I sell speaking opportunities and information products. So the bigger our brand, the more we basically do it for publicity. We don't really do it to make money.
Yeah, so you do it for publicity, but keep in mind that just because you write a book doesn't mean you have publicity from it. I mean, you can write a book and nobody will ever read it. And then in that case, do you have a book for publicity? Because keep in mind that once you write a book, like I'll give you an example. I have a separate business podcast, as does Blake. And I usually get a lot of pitches for people to be on my podcast. And then they'll say, oh, it's this wonderful author that we have. And the first thing that I always do is I look up the author on Amazon. And I see what's their ranking on Amazon. How many reviews do they have? If somebody barely has any reviews on Amazon, chances are their book did not sell that many copies. And so publicity implies that your book will do well. But if your book doesn't do well, keep in mind that, sometimes that can also be a little bit of a little peg against you. Because if you want to get, let's say, endorsements, or you want to get speaking gigs, anybody can look up your book and see, does it have a lot of reviews? Is it doing well? And if not, somebody might say, well, this person wrote a book and it didn't do well, so maybe we don't want them to speak. But again, that's probably a rare circumstance. My first reaction is that it will never hurt you to write a book. If you can get a book deal, get a book deal. Just keep in mind that you are going to work your ass off to sell that book. But if you can get it, do it.
And he also wants to know, he says that you're an expert about, and I think, Jacob, I can't watch you do that. Stop it. Are you guys also, are your spouses like driving you nuts? Like they're chewing and the biting of the fingernails. I love you, hon. Okay, back to the podcast, not marriage issues. Go look at Gretchen Rubin. She used to write.
Didn't she self-publish her book?
She used to write. That's not what I'm talking about. She used to write biographies about like Churchill and maybe Kennedy. And then she totally switched and she became a happiness expert and wrote The Happiness Project, which made her extremely famous. So you don't have to be an expert already in a topic. It's just a lot harder to do the research and find the sources if you're not an expert in the topic already and you don't have resources.
Yeah. I can't say that I was necessarily an employee experience expert or a leadership expert, but I went out and I interviewed 140 CEOs for my new book. And hey, that it lended a lot of credibility to the topic. And one of the other things that I want to mention is that a book is one part of your marketing, your business plan, right? I mean, the end all goal should not just be to write a book. Because after you write a book, then what? Like the book is a goal to do something, to get more speaking gigs, to sell something, to do, whatever it is. But ultimately, the goal of a book is to do something. So keep that in mind, that the book is just a one step along the process to accomplish whatever your goal is. And, I don't know what your goal is, but it's just something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is for Blake and I, before we wrote books, we spent many, many years building up our own personal brands. I mean, my first book came out in 2012 on collaboration with McGraw Hill. And I spent several years building up a following and a personal brand in that space before I wrote the book. My second book was in 2014 and then 2017 and then 2020. So every 2-3 years a new book came out, and Blake is on track for something similar as well for hers. But, keep that in mind that sometimes it takes time to build up that personal brand before you can even think about writing a book, because everyone wants to write a book, but, just filling out a proposal and sending it in is not going to work for most people.
And then someone says, do people really make money selling books? Isn't a book something we should self-publish and give away to build a brand and use the brand to sell other things?
So do you want me to answer that, or do you want to answer it?
I'm going to answer it.
Okay, go for it.
I want to hear myself talk and not you.
Excellent. You do that, and then I have some thoughts on that too.
People can make some money from selling books. I actually got an advance from Harper Collins, which was nice, but
why don't you tell people what an advance is? Because a lot of people don't know. An advance is a
chunk of money that they basically give you, and they had it in 3 chunks, where it was like the first was signing the deal, then the second chunk of money was when I submitted the book, and the third chunk was when the book came out. It wasn't a ton of money. It's about the same amount of money I would make from a speaking gig.
An advance is not free money. An advance just basically means they will give you the money up front.
Right.
And they will withhold that money from the royalties that you get.
Yeah.
So if you get an advance for $100,000, that means you won't get any more money from the publisher until you sell enough books to make up that $100,000 advance that they gave you. They're not just giving you the money for free, which I think a lot of people think that's what it is.
Do people really make money selling books, though, is the question. And I think it depends what you're trying to do. For Jacob and I, our core business is speaking. Speaking, you can make a lot of money speaking. And that is the only reason anyone would subject themselves to some of the hard times that come with speaking, which is like physically leaving, traveling, flying places, being vulnerable in front of hundreds of people. I mean, it's a great opportunity to share your thoughts, but it's a ton of work. And I'm pregnant and I've had to fly to Norway during this pandemic to speak. I mean, it's not always easy, but the point is, I can tell you that once my first book came out, my speaking schedule got much busier and I became a keynote speaker. And that allowed me to call myself a keynote speaker, which is the opening speaker for an event that gets paid. So if you self-publish and just give the books away to build the brand, I feel like that's something a software company does to generate leads. Otherwise, I just question, why would you do that? To give something away for free? That doesn't seem like it's... I'm a little biased, but I just wonder if you're just writing a book, spending all this time, and then you just give it away for free, is it really that valuable? Because don't you want to make money? Unless you work for a software company and it's a closed out online piece of content and you're generating leads for your software business. But otherwise, I think writing a book and giving it away, I don't know. That seems not very smart to me, unless you're capturing their email or data.
So my thought on that is I've seen a couple different ways of making it work. So first, we're not in the charity business. There is a general.
We do care about charity. And
yeah, but we're not in. But we're not in the charity business.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
You gotta be smart.
I'm not in the charity business, right? I mean, I do the things that I do because I want to make money doing it. I want to close deals. I want to get speaking gigs. I don't just want to do these things for fun. And there's an inherent perception in when you give things away for free. I mean, if people were giving away things to you for free, would you think that it's valuable? I mean, if it's valuable, why are they giving it away for free? So that's first and foremost. I think especially for a business audience, there's a certain expectation that if something is valuable, that they should pay for it, and they will be okay with paying for it. A Kindle book is $12. A hardcover book is $25. You can get it for a discount or like $18. It's not a ton of money. So that's first of all. I think if you're going to be putting a lot of time and effort into something, you should charge for it. Why not? However, there's also something to be said for giving away books for lead generation. And I've done this plenty of times. For example, I might buy 50 copies of my own book and do a giveaway to my newsletter list and give away 50 copies of my book.
But keep in mind, buying your own book is still extremely expensive.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I buy Kindle versions, which are $11 a copy. So
hardcover books are like...
Well, I don't usually give away hardcovers.
You can spend thousands and thousands of dollars doing that.
And I've done it, if I want to get book reviews, for example, on Amazon, I might say, hey, I'm giving away 100 copies of my book to people who are willing to review it on Amazon. You can leave a good review or a bad review. I just want you to review it. I'm willing to give away 100 copies of the book. So I've certainly done stuff like that before. If you're just talking about like lead generation, what I think is far more valuable is to get people to buy the book and give them bonus content than to give away the book for free. So in my case, I don't say, hey, I'm just going to give my book away for free that I spent, over a year writing and doing all this research for. Just come get it. It's free. Instead, what I say is, look, I worked my ass off and I put together this really great book. If you buy it, I will also give you access to some bonus content. I'll give you a link to 31 leadership hacks where you can get videos that I put together based on 31 CEO interviews. I'll give you a link to a special assessment or a survey that you can take if you buy the book. Like, I'm a big believer in giving people additional value for things that they buy instead of just giving away things for free. That's my perspective. Now, there are a lot of other people out there, famous motivational coaches and authors who say, you know what, we're going to give away our book for free. As many people as you want, come get it. And, they do that as a way. So first of all, whenever you see people doing that, they do that because they capture your email address, your name, your email address. And once you're in their system, they upsell you things like a course, a $500 course, a $300 course. They don't do it for charity. They do it to sell you something. So, I mean, I know there's a lot going on there, but if you're going to give away stuff for free, do it if you are getting something in return. Like I said, I'll give you my book for free if you get into my system. Once you're in my system, then I'm going to try to pitch you a course that is hundreds of dollars. And think about it. If you give away 1,000 copies of your book and, 50 people end up buying the course or 100 people end up buying the course, you've pretty much broken even or you've made your money back. And now you have all these leads in your system. So, I mean, this is probably a whole separate conversation for us to have on like marketing a book and doing funnels and all that sort of stuff. But
it's too much.
Yeah, it's too much for right now. But in general, I would say, don't give away the book for free. I prefer just giving away bonuses for people who buy the book. So somebody says, wow, I didn't realize that as an author, you actually have to buy your own books for these business development activities. So Lindsay, it depends on what the business development activities are. For example, if I want to get on a popular podcast, or if I want to get my book featured in a media publication, my publisher will send out lots of copies of those books. I mentioned I interviewed 140 CEOs. My publisher sent out 140 copies of my book to all of these CEOs. I didn't have to pay for any of it. But if I'm doing my own sort of business development campaign and I want to give away my own 100 copies of my book, my publisher is not just going to randomly send me 100 copies of the book and say, hey, give it out to whoever you want. I mean, if you have a good relationship with your publisher, you can negotiate certain things with them. Maybe they give me some copies. You also get a big author discount on them. But yeah, you're going to need to making your own investments in your book and in your own business development activities. Your publishers, they're also not in the charity business. They're in it to make money. So they're not just going to be giving out your book for free to whoever wants it. But my publisher has been pretty generous with giving it out to podcast people and media and stuff like that. Did you have any other questions on yours?
No, I think we're going to wrap. But
yeah, we covered a lot. So hopefully this is a good primer on where you can start. I think Blake and I are big believers that if you do want to write a book, pursue it. See what happens. You have unlimited resources and access out there thanks to Google. Don't be lazy. Go search for things, find the things that you need or want, submit your book proposals. And, it's not uncommon for people to submit 50, 100 book proposals before they get accepted.
And the best way to start is just to start. I think that was a big lesson of writing a book or a book pitch or anything. Just get started and don't have stage fright about what you present. Because if you believe in what you're doing, other people will be attracted to that and will also want to get on board. But I think that's a wrap for today's Be Your Own Boss podcast. I want to thank all of you for watching and listening. And if you have other questions, please email us morgans@byobpodcast.com.
Yep. And if you want to get access to more episodes, you can go to byobpodcast.com. We also have a newsletter there where you can subscribe to and you can get more content and be notified whenever we go live. So that's it for this episode. Oh, wait. So we got one more question about how to market individual podcasts, but that's probably, that's probably for a separate thing, not for the book thing. But for now, that's it for us. Hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and we'll see you on social media somewhere, I'm sure. Bye-bye.